The voodoo doll. You've seen it in movies, pierced with pins, dripping with malice. But what you don't know is that this cursed object has roots far darker and far older than Hollywood ever revealed. Tonight, we're pulling back the veil on the true origins of these instruments of possession and pain. Let me tell you something that will chill your blood. The voodoo doll isn't even from voodoo. The practice of using human effigies to inflict suffering stretches back over 4,000 years to the cradle of civilization itself. In ancient Mesopotamia, as early as the 2nd millennium BCE, sorcerers crafted clay figurines inscribed with their victims' names. These weren't toys. These were weapons. Cuneiform tablets detail how practitioners would manipulate these dolls, believing that every action performed on the effigy would manifest in the flesh of their target. The ancient Egyptians took this dark art even further. They created wax figurines called ush-abtis, but not all were benign servants for the afterlife. Historical records reveal that enemies of Pharaoh Ramses III used wax images of the king himself in assassination plots, performing rituals designed to bring about his death through sympathetic magic. The principle was simple and terrifying, like effects like harm the doll, harm the person. But here's where it gets truly sinister. The Greeks and Romans perfected the curse doll. They called them kolossoi, and these weren't just representations. They were prisons. Greek magicians used these effigies to capture dangerous spirits, bind ghosts, and trap what they considered malevolent deities. The ritual was methodical and brutal. 13 iron nails, a number sacred to the underworld, would be driven through specific body parts. A nail through the eyes to blind perception, through the ears to deafen reason, through the mouth to silence speech, through the heart to paralyze will. Each piercing didn't destroy the faculty. It imprisoned it, leaving the victim conscious but powerless. The Greek magical papyri, a collection of spells dating from the 2nd century BCE to the 5th century AD, contains detailed instructions for creating these instruments of torment. Professional sorcerers charge substantial fees for their services, crafting personalized curse dolls for clients seeking revenge, control, or destruction of their enemies. When the target was unknown, practitioners would create male and female pairs, ensuring no spirit could escape their net. European grimoires from the medieval period are filled with even more disturbing rituals. These texts instruct practitioners to not just create the doll, but to conduct a symbolic funeral, burying the effigy while reciting incantations. The belief was absolute. As the doll decayed in the earth, so too would the victim waste away, eventually succumbing to a mysterious death that no physician could explain or prevent. Now here's the twist that changes everything. When African slaves were brought to Haiti and Louisiana during the 17th and 18th centuries, they brought with them the Nkisi figures from the Congo region. These were spiritual containers, objects of power used to enforce oaths and community justice. But European colonizers, already familiar with their own puppet traditions, saw these African spiritual objects and merged the practices. They created something new, something more powerful. The voodoo doll, as we know it, was born from this unholy fusion of European curse magic and African spiritual practice. The word voodoo itself comes from the Fon language of West Africa, meaning spirit. But the French colonizers twisted it, using vaudou to describe what they saw as barbaric superstition. They feared what they didn't understand, and that fear was justified, because practitioners of this merged tradition understood something profound, that the physical and spiritual realms are not separate, but intimately connected through symbols and intention. In New Orleans, during the reign of Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of the 19th century, the practice reached its apex. The city became a nexus of dark power, where curse dolls were crafted with devastating precision. These weren't the crude Hollywood props you imagine. They were sophisticated ritual objects, often containing personal effects of the victim, hair, nail clippings, even blood, items that maintained a contagious magical link. The principle of contagious magic holds that things once in contact continue to influence each other across any distance. Imagine that. A single strand of your hair in the wrong hands could make you vulnerable to forces you can't see or fight. The construction process itself was a ritual of focused malice. Practitioners would spend days, sometimes weeks, charging the doll with concentrated hatred and intention. Every stitch, every pin, every whispered word added layers of power. The doll wasn't given the victim's name until the very end, at which point the connection became absolute and irreversible. What makes these objects truly terrifying is the psychological component. Victims who discovered they were being targeted often fell ill or died, not necessarily from supernatural forces, but from the sheer terror and belief in the curse's power. The mind, convinced of its own destruction, would manifest physical symptoms: heart palpitations, wasting sickness, paralysis. Whether the magic was real or the belief made it real becomes a distinction without difference. Today, voodoo dolls have been commercialized, sold in vending machines and tourist shops, reduced to novelties. But make no mistake, the knowledge of how to properly construct and activate these objects still exists, passed down through initiates and practitioners who understand the old ways, the rituals detailed in those ancient texts, the techniques perfected over millennia. They haven't been forgotten. They've just gone underground. The dark truth is this: the voodoo doll represents humanity's oldest and most persistent belief that we can reach across the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds to impose our will on others. From Mesopotamian clay to Egyptian wax, from Greek kolossoi to New Orleans puppets, the form changes, but the intent remains. Control, harm, power over the powerless. So the next time you see a voodoo doll dismissed as superstition or Hollywood fiction, remember what you've learned tonight. Remember the 4,000 years of ritual refinement. Remember the 13 iron nails. Remember that some knowledge is dangerous precisely because it works. Want to dive deeper into the forbidden practices of black magic? Visit www.darkbargain.org for more. But be warned, some doors once opened can never be closed.